my Doctorate of Ministry was kind of a continuation of my Master's of Arts in Buddhist Studies and Certificate in Buddhist Chaplaincy that I did at IBS, Institute of Buddhist Studies, when I graduated in 2020. I think that's the date. I received a lot of encouragement from my teachers, and I had been thinking about what's sort of the next step that I'd like to do, and um, I like I like engaging with academia, but I don't know that I see myself as an academic. And the Doctorate of Ministry degree is very practical. It's usually in uh, the students in the Doctorate of Ministry program are usually scholar practitioners or ministers, chaplains, people who are really already doing a lot of engaged work in their own religious community and thinking of innovations, ways to grow, develop, maybe create new possibilities in those communities. And the Pacific School of Religion is really a wonderful place. It's very progressive. I took a few classes there in my master's program. Um, One was, or a couple were with Reverend Dr. Dorsey Blake, who's been my mentor even through the Doctor of Ministry program. He's just a phenomenal teacher. His style of teaching is very conversational and less lecturing. He often invites religious community leaders to come and speak in the courses that he teaches, and I think that was a really big part of why I decided to go to school there and to pursue the Doctorate of Ministry program. I also received a lot of encouragement from Reverend Dr. Yamaoka, who taught the class that I'm now teaching at the Institute of Buddhist Studies. And I guess one thing that really struck me in my time uh, growing into the Buddhist churches of America, most specifically the Berkeley Buddhist Temple, was the community and how diverse the community was at the Berkeley Buddhist Temple still is. And my own experiences around injustice, marginalization as a trans person, as a queer person. And I felt like there was a lot of potential for thinking and maybe like very systematically understanding Jodo Shinshu teachings, understanding more broadly Mahayana Buddhist teachings, and how those things might connect to justice, or maybe a better word for that is shared liberation of all beings. And so my project in the Doctorate of Ministry was building upon Yamaoka Sensei's class. And in the class, I added a lot of different Buddhist perspectives from different voices, from trans people, from different people of color, and other social theories too. One of the books that we read several chapters from in my class is called Hospicing Modernity by, I have it on my lap right now, by Vanessa Machado de Oliveira, who's a mixed Brazilian indigenous German person and a scholar of education. And in her book, she talks about a lot of the problems that exist in this modern world related to colonialism, racism, sexism, all the myriad forms of structural discrimination that we clever humans come up with, and how the system is untenable and it is dying, and what is our role in hospicing this system and dreaming of new systems. And so to me, as a Pure Land Buddhist, I find that that approach is very much in line with the story of Bodhisattva Dharmakara, who becomes Amida Buddha, and envisioning a world that's more just, a world that's more loving and kind, where everyone's treated with dignity. And so that's kind of the core focus of that class. And that's one of my artifacts in my Doctorate of Ministry project. Another one is very community-based. It's a series of workshops on inclusion for gender diverse peoples in Jodo Shinshu temples. And I've done that with several friends. It's certainly not just a me thing, it's definitely community-based work. And then a series of educational workshops we've been doing around Palestine, and understanding what's going on there, the history, the colonial history, especially of Palestine, and how it's our responsibility as Buddhists to understand that history and to be able to advocate for those who are marginalized, much like Venerable Shinran did, our founder. And so that's a long-winded answer to your question. Um,
Long-winded answers, and any answers are very much welcome. And thank you for going into that, and also thank you for doing this very important work. It's your focus is shining a light on very needed uh, research uh, look at research like topics, and doing the work that you're doing to support communities by shining a light on injustices that are within maybe Buddhist environments, within the colonized environments, and also to providing community spaces, being a part of that community and making it a community oriented course or experience for people, making sure that it's not just serving me. This is for the people that are experiencing things like this within a community, and having a community there is so important. So thank you for doing that. And I have more questions just about some of the things that you just shared, but I also just because so much of your work, it sounds like your scholarship for your Doctorate of Ministry degree, but also two of the courses that you're now leading, there's a great weight to the topics because injustice is full of oppression, suppression, violence, and inequity, and all of that, and it is it's a tough topic to discuss. It's a tough topic to experience. It's a tough topic to be in community with people that are experiencing those things as well. How do you balance uh, the academic approach, the teacher student dynamic, while also engaging with this material and this lived experience that you're shedding a light on in your courses?
that's a good question, and it's one I ask myself every day. Um, I don't, the modern world, I believe, wants us to have simple and concise answers to very complex problems that have developed over centuries, if not millennia. And the process of constantly asking ourselves questions like that, like how do we navigate these difficult times, difficult confrontations that may happen, and still be in community. And I don't know the perfect way to do that. My personal philosophy is to try to listen intently to others when they speak, even when sometimes what they say is very hard to hear, whether it's from someone who's experienced a lot of oppression and marginalization and violence, or it's someone with relatively a lot of privilege who feels like those things are icky and they're things we should avoid, and they get in the way of harmony, they get in the way of peace. And it's true that they do, but just pretending that they don't exist is not true peace. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, in his letter from a Birmingham jail, talks about negative peace. And that's a piece where people focus on only order, uh, and not in dealing with the reasons why there is injustice to begin with, the inequality, the discrimination that we all are part of. And I think that's part of my approach too, is that we're all complicit in these systems of discrimination and in violence. And I think that's part of the Buddhist teachings of interbeing too, is that we are both the victims and the perpetrators. Even if we have a lot of privilege, that in itself is also harming us because it limits our perspective, it limits us from connecting to other people and from authentically hearing their stories, and what they go through. And so those are things I try to remind myself. The truth is that academic institutions have all of their own problems, just like religious institutions. They're made by people, and we want to have hierarchies. We want to have order, and that order comes at a price. And so navigating what that means too is something that I often ask myself, both as a minister and as a teacher, but also as a trans person when we have an administration who's really clearly trying to go after us. Not just us, of course, after other marginalized groups, after immigrants, after folks who can't afford to live in this crazy oligarchy that we've created. And yeah, so those are things that I remind myself of every day. I also think a lot about the story of Bodhisattva Dharmakara from the larger sutra and the smaller sutra of this royal who is really inspired by the Buddha Dharma and wants to become a Buddha. And so part of that aspiration is to evaluate the many worlds that exist to find out what is good and what is bad in those worlds and to create a new one that's full of just the goodness, full of opportunity for all of us to pursue the Buddha way. And that I think is at the heart of Pure Land Buddhism. So that for me is kind of the hope that shines and helps us to see the darkness in some ways. And so it's easy just to get nihilistic and dwell only on the sad things. And I do that sometimes. I mean, I think most of us probably do. But at the same time, hope is a discipline and it's something that we have to constantly look for, light, hope, connection. And so those are kind of things that guide me when things get difficult.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that phrasing too of hope is a discipline. I mean, I think that that is something that uh I've been reacting in my own way towards the things that are going on right now globally, but definitely certainly in our nation. And uh there are times when the hope element it feels harder to have the hope part, but then if you frame it into hope is a discipline, it's like you have to show up to that hope. You have to create environments to keep that sustained, and it is a sustained effort. And thank you for offering that, especially with that inspiration that you were getting from the larger sutra, I believe. Um, is that part of what drew you into Pure Land Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu in the first place? That feeling that you were conveying, because I know that you were originally from, I believe, Pembroke, Virginia, and you found yourself in the Bay Area, and exploring, maybe reading about some Buddhism, and then you found yourself at, I believe, the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. And uh, was some of what you had just said part of what kind of brought you in deeper, or was it a myriad of things?
Hmm. I think it was a lot of different things that brought me to Pure Land Buddhism. And maybe at first, like a lot of white folks who come to Jodo Shinshu Temple, it was a little exotic, a little strange. I didn't quite understand it. Like my first exposure to Buddhism was sort of like the more secular Buddhism of like sort of pop psychology Buddhism and like that kind of thing. And at the same time, like now those things aren't as meaningful to me. Psychology and Buddhism and secularism. However, maybe there were some sort of upaya that led me to where I am now. And I think the more I learned about Pure Land Buddhism, about the history of Pure Land Buddhism, and the many different aspects, all the stories, the sutras, those things kind of forced me to think more deeply about my own life and about some of the things that I'd struggled with since I was a kid. I didn't uh, move to the Bay Area for financial gain or to find a job. I moved here to escape persecution as a queer person in a white supremacist kind of very conservative society. I have difficult relationship with that part of my life, and I'm still working on healing that. And I think Buddhism, and learning the Buddha Dharma has been really helpful in some ways. And in other ways, it's made things more tense too between me and my family of origin, because of their religious beliefs and sort of exclusivism that their Christianity involves, makes it a little bit more difficult for us to get along at times. But ultimately, I am here because of a lot of different things. When I moved to the Bay Area, it was to get a master's degree in geology. That's what I studied in undergrad, and I didn't get my master's degree, but I finished all the coursework. I made some really wonderful friends, and I think I learned a lot about climate change. I learned a lot about the history of the earth and those things that sometimes I guess we think that science is very rigid and objective, but my experience in geology was that um, there's so much that we don't know, that the world is still this magical place. And for me, Pure Land Buddhism fits within that worldview too. And I think there was, yeah, like you said, there are myriad circumstances that led me to where I am today. And I'm really, they're not all happy and they're not all easy to deal with, but I'm grateful to be here regardless.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about your experience where you found yourself attending a service and then meeting some people, sitting down for tea, meeting a bunch of community members, and then finding yourself volunteering and kind of deepening a relationship, not just with Pure Land Buddhism or Jodo Shinshu, but with the people that are there, and that kind of created a environment for you to realize that I want to make this a large part of my life. I want to make this my life is to live in this temple, to live in this temple environment. What was it like to decide that the ministerial path is for you, and what was your experience like going through that and going through Tokudo and things like that? And because I'm sure just like how your experience, all the things that have brought you to your exploration, your early exploration of Buddhism had a lot of positive elements, a lot of not positive elements to it. I imagine that committing to a path probably has some of those things baked in as well.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out about the community because I think maybe beyond a lot of other things, that was probably the most attractive thing about Buddhism was the sangha here at Berkeley Buddhist Temple. There's so many really sweet, kind people here. And immediately, like, I felt welcomed. I went to a different temple first, and no one ever talked to me. I'm not going to say the name of the temple. But it was a totally different experience at Berkeley Buddhist Temple, and I met so many different kinds of people. Like I said, the community is really diverse here, and to me, that was really powerful because I grew up in a not so diverse community, and so um, I studied Japanese language in high school and in college. I've always been interested in other cultures. And so that was part of it too, is the cultural aspect of the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. And there was a taiko program. I tried taiko for a little bit. I had an idea of like really loving it, but it wasn't quite for me. But I still love listening to people play taiko. It's amazing. Let's see. There was something I thought of when you asked the question that I wanted to bring up, but I can't remember what it was. Um, oh yeah, going through deciding to become a minister. That was I think so when I left grad school at San Francisco State, a wonderful school where I was doing geology, I started working full time in retail. Eventually landed at a cosmetics company, and I was a makeup artist, and I helped teach people about makeup and skincare. Eventually, once I got into management, I started to see how corporate America does really not care for regular people. And those feelings of resentment kind of really got to me and made me question, like, what is the point of living a life if we're just cogs in a machine? And so that was what drew me to Buddhism too. That was part of it. I considered myself a militant atheist until then because of all the harm that I'd experienced from the church growing up. And I think seeing the ministers that I'd interacted with, at the time, Berkeley Buddhist Temple's resident minister was Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto, who is one of my favorite teachers ever. He's incredibly kind and diplomatic and just a wonderful teacher. He Yeah, I just really enjoyed his Dharma messages, and I don't honestly think very often I want to be like someone else, but I did with him. And then our next minister was Reverend Kenta Shibata, and I felt very similar. Like the Reverend Matsumoto and Reverend Shibata are very different, but I still felt this really warm sense of kindness and caring for the community. And I feel like the community had, even though it had only been like what, a couple years when I decided that I wanted to pursue ministry, that the community had already given so much to me, and I had an obligation in some ways, not a resentful one, but one a joyful one, to give back to the community and share what I'd learned. And so at first I thought maybe chaplaincy would be fun, or I don't know. I was interested in sort of the deeper changes we can make in ourselves or find ourselves making as we expose ourselves to community and the Buddha Dharma. And so that was something I thought about. Spiritual care was something that had been something I was always really interested in too, especially with Reverend Shibata, who was a marriage and family therapist for a little while. And so I just decided that figuring that out could be part of the process of going through school. And it was. And when I was mostly done with school, I had the good fortune of being able to do an exchange program in Kyoto in Japan for a year. And so I lived there. And that was a really wild time for me because I felt really independent. I felt like I could explore aspects of myself that I wasn't so comfortable doing here in the US. And so at that point, I came out as trans and sort of settled into maybe like the label of being non-binary, although like I've also feel like there's a real deep emptiness of gender that I've learned through like delving into who- what gender is. Like that's a very deep topic and complicated, and there's like social, cultural, religious aspects of those things, but there's also deep personal connections to what is gender. And I made trans friends in Japan, which sounds wild because I think a lot of people, when they think of Japan, it's like more conservative or traditional, but I met so many kinds of different people in Japan, just like you would meet in the Bay Area or other places. And so that was a really big turning point for me in my life of really like coming into my authentic self. And it was just incredible. And I will always associate those times with my time in Japan, in Kyoto and Osaka. And going to Tokudo happened right when I got to Japan. So I feel like there was a different version of me that went through Tokudo than the one who went through Kyoshi just a couple years ago. And Kyoshi was much more difficult because I think I'd already started to transition socially, medically, and it was a lot harder because I started to see how institutionally ministry is pretty skewed towards cisgender heterosexual men. A lot of my women friends who are ministers, it's hard for them for their own reasons, which I think is worth looking at. For me, as a non-binary person, after I got Kyoshi certification, one of the first interviews that was done by the Wheel of Dharma, which is the Buddhist Churches of America newsletter, I was misgendered, and it I mean, I have different feelings about that sometimes, depending on who I'm with, and how much I trust them. I get misgendered pretty often in the community, and so I made a name tag with my pronouns really big on them. And it's still hard for some people to wrap their head around. So I try to not be too attached to expecting other people to be perfect. Um, and at the same time, there is a lot of minority stress around being a transgender minister. There aren't many of us. There's not really many other trans Buddhists that I know very well, and so it is a bit lonely sometimes. And I feel a lot of pressure in trying to convey what my needs are, when it comes to the idea of being appointed to a temple, as a full-time minister and not having a lot of say in where that is. I think there's a certain naivety about the real lived experiences of transgender people. Um, Buddhism teaches us to be kind and loving to everyone because that's the rule of karma. We want to sow good fruit. And I think that requires a lot of careful self-examination. And I don't know that all of us have engaged in ways of doing that that aren't dominated by a lot of cis heteronormative ideas. Like if you turn on the news, like you'll hear people debating over whether or not I exist, whether or not I deserve to get the health care that I know that I need, and whether or not trans children exist. Like those things are really painful for me to hear. And sometimes people who aren't as informed about what kind of impact that might have on me may expect me to speak for the community. And that can be really difficult. And so I guess I really appreciate the opportunity to be a minister, and I'm still navigating what that's going to look like for me down the road. And I feel mostly very safe at the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. I feel like people there know me really well because I've been here for over 10 years now, and um yeah, I think I'm concerned about like what it would be like to go to a different temple. I also serve at the Buddhist Temple of Marin, and I've been there for 4 years, and I think people know me pretty well there, and I feel pretty safe in that environment. But I get nervous when it comes to guest speaking at other temples, or going to national council or some of these bigger spaces where there's a lot of unknowns.
Certainly. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. It really is. It's heartbreaking to hear the things that that you've shared and the things that are happening to yourself, to people in your community, and to have that sense of isolation too, of your own um, not being necessarily aware of that many trans Buddhists. So like when those things happen to you, it has like an added isolating factor to it, and yeah, like there's that uh, organizational prejudice, or that organizational gap in understanding, where yeah, if you're assigned to a temple in a city that is not a safe city for you, or a safe space for you, a safe environment for you, um well, you might have to reject that uh that assignment, and then that creates an issue with that. And there's like this element of not being seen, not being heard in your own communities. and and then there's also that imposition that is, well, because you're the person that is representing, by your just existence and presence in this community, the marginalized population, that makes you have to speak as a leader for that community, and that is a great weight, and that is a great um it can be a burden for yourself. So thank you for sharing all of those things. It is uh very hard to hear. And that said, I mean, I do think that what we were talking about earlier is that you have these classes that you're leading, and communities that you're a part of, that are working towards undoing some of that burden, working towards shining a light and raising awareness to the the marginalization, the oppression that are going on, especially within this white Christian dominant American culture that we're in. And and also too, I wanted to mention that your experience in Japan seems like it was a very important one for your identity and for yourself. And I just want to kind of go a little bit more into your experience there because I know that you revisited Japan recently too.
Mhm.
And this is maybe after some of your certification within Jodo Shinshu, maybe some of your completion of some classes otherwise, and further along in your academic career. So you had gone during your Tokudo experience, and now you've gone maybe I think it was last year that you went to visit some friends. Maybe it was 2 years ago.
2023, like a year and a
Twitch.
half.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
What was it like to kind of go back to and to have have gone further down your journey and into learning more about yourself and to bring that self into Japan and to meet your community that you had met there before with some good friends and bring that self to them.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that question. It felt like coming home, to be honest. Um, Almost like I'd never left. Uh, Something that may be worth also stating is when I was oh, 19, I guess. I was kind of put in a position where I had to come out to my family and then getting kicked out of my home. And um, one of my good friends at the time is from Yokohama. Her name's Nami. She helped me find my first apartment. We took care of each other in a lot of really wonderful ways that almost like siblings would. And so those two times I went to Japan, I stayed with her and her family for a while. The first time I stayed almost 3 months with them, which was really incredible. And so in a way, Japan is my home. And like I feel like I've been adopted, in that sense. Excuse me, by my family in Yokohama, and then my queer family in Osaka. It all started by going to a party, a house party in like October of 2019, and I met like 5 people there, and then that group just kept growing. And this last time when I returned, like I said, it was like I'd never left. My Japanese had gotten a tiny bit better. And so I was able to speak more Japanese with my friends, and I also made lots of new friends too. And Osaka is very cosmopolitan. I made a couple friends from Africa, a friend from Jamaica, um, and lots of other Japanese friends too. And it was around my birthday when we went, and 2 other friends had their birthdays at the same time. And all these people came and they brought me presents, even though they didn't know me. It was incredible. I just felt so comfortable and so at home. And so we had a little house party for our birthday, and it wasn't little at all. There was like 50 people there. And then we went clubbing, and we went to these really cool like Afro-Caribbean clubs. And we went to like some of the more popular queer clubs in Osaka, and it was and then like I reconnected with one of my friends who came to visit me in the US once. And she took me to this little izakaya that she was working at, owned by a lady whose son is a fisher person, and he like goes and brings in the catch of the day, and that's the special of the day. It was really cool. And it was kind of like in the more suburban areas of Osaka, so there weren't many foreigners there. And the owner was just really excited that I came. And I felt so happy too to be able to speak at least a little bit of Japanese with her. And the food was great, and we just had a wonderful time. And there's so many other connections just like that in Japan. I feel like we're just happy to be together. It feels like a family. And yeah, I think they could see that I was more comfortable with myself. Um, I certainly did feel more comfortable with myself and more authentic. And like late at night at like 3 a.m. and we're all pretty tipsy and we can have some pretty deep conversations, like very profound conversations about spirituality. And I I want to be able to share those things in some way with more people. Part of what I was supposed to be doing is interviewing folks, and as part of my doctorate of ministry, I wanted to be able to share the interviews. But there was just so much going on, I couldn't include that in my project. But I still have those recordings. I've transcribed many of them, and maybe that's a project for the future. But all of my friends there weren't necessarily just Japanese. There were a lot of international people, and there was some kind of amazing magic that just went down. I did tarot readings with several of my friends, and that was really fun. Tarot is a really good way to like get to know people. They ask really deep, meaningful questions. They talk about what they're struggling with in life. I see it as like a tool for counseling, to be honest, and like connecting with our deeper spiritual selves too. I know that there's some like prohibitions against like fortune telling and gambling, or not gambling, fortune telling, and it's a superstition, I guess, in Jodo Shinshu, but I don't know. I don't really see this as a violation, maybe just like a better way to connect with folks. Um, yeah, it just Japan feels like a home for me.
Hmm. Gosh, that's wonderful to hear. It's especially given our conversation so far, the hardships that you've had to face and that you continue to face. It's really wonderful to hear that you can reconnect with a community that can grow. I mean, you go and it's you can go and meet new people, and they're bringing you birthday presents that you might not have met, and they're from all over the world that are meeting you there, and it really does seem like some sort of magic was happening in a very beautiful way. And I just particularly love that you went to that izakaya place, and there's the owner or the chef comes with the fisher person comes back with the catch of the day because that's what was caught. It's like that's what you get. This is what we've got here. This is the catch of the day. And two, there's a side note about tarot. I do feel like there's an importance and a lot of insight you can get from. It doesn't have to necessarily be fortune for the future. It can just be uh, an interpretation of symbols to help you kind of guide your life. So I hear that for sure. I don't see too much superstition around it as well. Um, and then just briefly, because we touched on it earlier, I believe this was in Japan when you started to identify this element of gender yourself, which is that there's like an emptiness to gender.
Mm.
And I know in Buddhism, a lot of people that might be critical of Buddhism or not quite uh, in the know all the way or has a full understanding of Buddhism, they associate emptiness with a sense of nihilism and a something that is, oh well, then if everything is empty, then what's the point, kind of thing. And I wanted to just kind of go into the specific topic of gender with you, with that relationship with nothingness, and what that meant for you in the context of where you were, but also too, and just what that did for you and how you interpret that.
Mhm. Yeah. Let's see. So I think that realization of like really sort of understanding gender as empty personal from my own personal experience was also me looking back on my life and seeing how it had always been empty and I'd played with it in different ways. Like when I was working for the cosmetics company, I'd often wear lots of makeup and be prettier than a lot of girls. And then when I there was a later time in my life where I grew a beard and I kind of had a Jesus vibe, like those aspects of gender, but also like interpersonal relationships and how we behave that are sometimes relegated to certain genders. And I also dated another non-binary person when I was in Japan, and that also blew my mind because I'd never had the chance to do that before. And being able to navigate gender with another person in like an intimate way is really was really helpful for me too. Because I, I was even as a child, I was misgendered because I was like in public settings, I could go to GameStop or something and someone would misgender me, and like I thought it was confusing at the time, but now I look back and think, well, does does it really matter? Like, well, what makes a man or a woman or like whatever in between, whatever that is too. Like, and to be able to sort of when I think of emptiness, I think of being able to like pull apart the threads of a tapestry. And then if you do that, then is it a tapestry still? If it's just a pile of threads? Like what that this is sort of the question of emptiness in Buddhism. Like there's so much it's a deep teaching that none of us can really fully comprehend unless we're Buddha. But there's a lot of metaphors that sort of point us towards that meaning of emptiness. And so is gender just a bunch of social contracts that we have of like how we behave, how we dress, how we present ourselves, how we talk, what we believe, like our understanding of our own power and privilege, entitlement? Like those are all aspects of gender. But what's underneath of that? Like body parts? Like is that truly gender too? Um, I have only read little bits of Judith Butler. I'm still working on building my academic background in transgender studies. I have a lot of books to read, but like I think I've experienced it intimately in my life, and so I look forward to being able to understand it more like intellectually, I suppose, but that doesn't mean that it's going to make it more valid for me, I guess. And so, one thing that I've struggled with in Buddhist spaces is when people who do experience a good deal of privilege, meaning that their identities tend to be aligned with the ones that are most considered normal in society, they will say things to people who are marginalized, like, oh, well, that identity is empty, so why do you worry about it so much? And in my class, we read a translation of the Heart Sutra by Tai Thich Nhat Hanh, and he provides some really great illustrations about why he changed some of the translation that he inherited. And one of them is a story about a novice going to a monk, and uh, the monk asks him to describe what is emptiness, and so he does, and like this doesn't exist, that doesn't exist, and so the monk grabs him by the nose and twists it really hard, and then the novice cries out in pain, and the monk says, "Well, the nose is empty. Like, why are you screaming?" The reason is because like we live in a conventional world with conventional truths. And so they have real impact on people's lives. And so when I say gender is empty, it isn't meant to say that there's no real lived reality of gender, but it's something we make up to sort of classify ourselves, maybe help us feel more organized in society. But with that, there's always the possibility and the reality that we also create harmful conditions for people too.
Certainly, and thank you for providing that nuance, just in the sense of well, this is a very large, important concept that the Buddha is more privy to than us as we try to figure it out. But the metaphors are helpful, and yeah, certainly that story about the nose. I mean, uh, it we do there are real consequences. There are real things that we can experience in a conventional sense, even if if I could say the apple is empty, so what's the point of eating it? Well, I get hungry at some point, So, uh, yeah, no, I absolutely hear that. And then just briefly, I remember you mentioning that you're looking into reading more thoroughly within transgender studies. and but you have this intimate lived experience with it. And I was just curious, you have a wonderful, profound, important story of your lived experience, and that's just me saying that. I do think that you have some really important things that you share, and I'm so grateful and thankful that you share them with me today. I was wondering if you are interested in writing a book, or in some way documenting and sharing your life story, if that would be something that you'd ever be open to doing, because there really are some very moving and powerful things about it, just that you shared with me today.
Thank you for that validation. Um, yeah, it's something I've thought about. It's something I've done a little bit. Part of Yamaoka Sensei's class is the idea of formation, where we sort of reflect back on our lives, both the struggles and the wonderful moments, within sort of the context of seeing those things as they play out uh, within the Buddha Dharma, and sort of kind of analyzing ourselves and providing some kind of safe container for ourselves and our classmates, because we're sharing those stories with others. I have to say that when I first took that class and I wrote that paper, that's when I started to really uncover a lot of trauma that I had kind of pushed aside to just survive. And I think that that's something most of us do, who have adverse childhood experiences, who have experienced abuse, just a lot of minority stress, discrimination, so many other things. And even people with relative privilege have, they have their own trauma too. Um, I think that's a fairly universal experience, is trauma, and it depends on how resourced we are and how we deal with them, if we're able to, or if we need to push things down, or if we can try to work through them, and if we have this resources externally too. All of those things come into play. And I was not well resourced when I was writing that paper, and I fell apart for a while. And I'm still working on pulling myself back together, I think. Um, I would like to be able to share myself more with people, and it does require a lot of vulnerability, and especially with a lot of the public discourse right now. Um, I don't know that this is the time, or maybe it is the time. I don't know. But one thing I will say is that not everybody reads books. And um, sometimes I feel like my lived experience with my friends, with my sangha, with my chosen family, those experiences of connection have been more profound than reading a book. And like Huey P. Newton said, theory without practice ain't shit. And so um, I think also, like, the reason why I chose a doctorate of ministry rather than a PhD is that I want to focus on practice. And I do like writing, and so maybe that'll happen in the future. But right now, I'm thinking a lot more about practice and how to be in the world. Um, and I think that's, yeah, maybe one day a book or two, or who knows. But right now, my focus is on survival and helping myself survive, but also helping a lot of other people survive, because our liberation is entangled. It's not something that only happens for one of us or one group of us. Um, and perhaps writing more will be something that I do. I really like creating. I recently did a little sculpture project with Sculpey. It's not anything incredible, but that is something that I would like to pour myself into a little bit more, is creative work, and writing can be creative too. I just have to figure out what is the medium I want to put out into the world of me, I guess. And art is something that can be really collaborative. And honestly, if I did write a book, it would certainly be a volume, something that I share with friends, like other people's voices would be involved in that.
Mm. Mhm.
And if I did something artistic, I would want that to be a group project too, because yeah, I feel like that's what's needed more than anything right now is our ability to collaborate and resist when we can. But it has to happen in community. It can't be an individualist project.
And thank you for emphasizing that. But there is that, I suppose, in a American cultural sense, there is this kind of sense of like I'm an individual and I'll produce a body of work or I'll produce something and I'll then market it and then people will support my work and it'll be mine and then I can do this and then the other thing with that. Maybe it'll maybe I can make a career, my career out of that. Uh, and I appreciate your approach and you're sharing that. Well, if should I choose to have a creative element to my practice or a creative element to my life and what I want to share, emphasizing that sense of community because um, after all, what you'd be creating would be for maybe the community that wants to hear it, and so why not have them in a part of it and create that much more meaning as a result. What is Sculpey? What is that? Is that like a
Oh, it's a polymer clay that you can
oh
bake in the oven at a low temperature, like 200 something Fahrenheit.
Oh, I see. Okay, because I thought it was like an app or something. I was
Oh,
like, I didn't know like what if that was like a, okay, got it. Cool, cool, cool. Well, wonderful. And then I just had two brief questions as we come to a close, and I really do appreciate you taking the time today. I just wanted to ask if there was anything that you'd like want to promote, whether it's a cause or a foundation that you're a part of that you uh, want to get some more eyes and ears on, or if it's something that you're aware of and you want to get some more people to become aware of it themselves. And then also to if there's any advice that you would want to have heard as you were coming up along the Buddhist path at any point, and yeah, at how what you would offer yourself in that position.
hmm. Well, I think right now, mutual aid for trans folks, especially trans folks of color, is much more important than donating to organizations. So if you have social media and you see requests for mutual aid from trans folks, especially trans folks of color, please donate to those people. Um, if you are interested in Buddhist practice with a wonderful trans teacher, meditation instructor, my friend Eli Wren Brown in Chicago has an incredible practice, and it's called Abolitionist Dreaming Practice. If you go on Instagram, that's the name of it. Um, Please subscribe to the work that they do. They do incredible healing work. A lot of their focus is on the Black community, but they also do other sittings and events for a broader array of folks too. That's that. And then maybe like when it comes to uh well, no, I want to speak more to Eli. They've been a wonderful friend. Maybe someone you want to interview in the future if they'd be interested. They've been an inspiration. They've helped me like crack open Jodo Shinshu in a different way that I never really thought of. Part of my Doctorate of Ministry project was also like an interpretation of Bodhisattva Dharmakara as an abolitionist. And so Eli's friendship has just been such a meaningful thing for me, and I love them so much. So yeah, support them if you can. And then I guess what I would say to myself maybe 10 years ago is that it's gonna be hard. Make sure you lean into your friendships. Um, Seek out therapy sooner than later. Get that support and just know that you're loved. And I say that for anyone who's um, navigating identity, navigating who to be in this crazy world that we're living in, all the seekers, anyone who wants to see a more compassionate and kind world. Yeah, lean into your relationships.
Reverend CJ, thank you so much for speaking with me today. That was such a wonderful conversation, and thank you for that really wonderful advice. And now absolutely look into your friend Eli's work and look into the mutual aid for people that are marginalized and all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for doing it and for being a part of it and for building community in that way. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your life, because I know that it has a lot of elements to it that are difficult to discuss. So I appreciate it. And also, but at the same time, there's a lot of inspiration, a lot of wonderful, beautiful elements, especially that magical time in Japan that continues to be there for you. I'm so glad it is where it is for you. And so thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making a safe container. I appreciate that.